Okay, now that we've heard from the business interests that employ many of the people who earn minimum wage, it's time to talk with someone who organizes with many of those workers. Marcela Diaz is the founding director of Somos Un Pueblo Unido, a statewide immigrant-based organization that works to promote racial and worker justice in New Mexico. Marcela has been organizing minimum wage workers for decades in our state. In many instances, these are some of the most vulnerable people here, and not just because of how little money they make. In her conversation with Lou, Marcela explains the barriers that block people of the bottom rung of the wage ladder from climbing higher.
Marcela Diaz, founding executive director of Somos Un Pueblo Unido. Thank you so much for joining me on New Mexico in Focus.
Thank you, Lou. Happy to be here.
Now, I want to start with a bit of a profile of minimum wage workers in New Mexico. Who are we talking about when we talk about people making the lowest rate possible?
Well, we certainly are talking about folks who are working in some very key and essential industries that typically are minimum wage and also often subject to minimum wage violations. And that's the home health care field, folks who work in social assistance, right? So home health care, child care, folks who work in private households are often minimum wage workers and are often subject to wage theft, people in the food industry, in agriculture, certainly. And so those are a lot of the folks that we work with who are working and still making minimum wage or close to it. We, of course, as Somos Un Pueblo Unido, we are a statewide immigrant-based economic justice organization, and the folks that come to our organization for help with these issues or to support campaigns and to be a part of campaigns demanding higher minimum wages and better benefits are immigrants, both documented and undocumented. But we did a study with Dr. Andrew Schrank back in 2012, specifically on Mexican immigrants. And what it showed was that a lot of immigrants, regardless of status, but certainly undocumented immigrants, are making for minimum wage, not everyone, but are disproportionately in the minimum wage category, as well as they're in the minimum wage category and they're also subject to many wage violations.
I'll get to wage theft in a second and its impact on workers and the overall state economy. But setting that aside for just now, what are some of the other pressures that these folks are feeling other than making the lowest wage allowed by law?
Folks right now are living paycheck to paycheck in these categories. And certainly one of the other categories is folks who don't have high school equivalency. And we have one of the highest non-high school equivalency rates in the country. We have one of the highest low adult literacy rates in the country. So this also leads to a big percentage of folks who are still making either the minimum wage or close to the minimum wage. And so the pressures are the pressures that we all have, but more acute. And that is that they are dealing with rising housing costs across the state, and certainly in urban areas like Albuquerque, Las Cruces, and Santa Fe. But we see this also in places like Hobbs, New Mexico, where Somos Un Pueblo Unido has a lot of members, and Carlsbad, just cost prohibitive to certainly buy a home, but to even rent. And so folks are spending far more than 1/3 of their salaries and their wages on monthly wages on housing. That's the number one issue that people are dealing with. Childcare, not having access to childcare. And you would think with all of the wonderful funding that has gone into childcare and subsidies that people will be able to access it readily, but we don't have a lot of providers, particularly in childcare deserts and in other areas. Not having access to other workforce development skills training opportunities for lots of different reasons, including just having to work 2 jobs or 1.5 jobs or 3 jobs to make ends meet for families. So there is a lot of pressure on families right now who are in this category.
Could you describe how that list of barriers, how that keeps some of these workers from moving up the economic ladder?
Yeah, the people are just stuck in low-wage jobs, living paycheck to paycheck, trying to make ends meet, trying to deal with the lack of childcare or paying for childcare, not being able. Food insecurity is a huge problem for a lot of these families, especially with children, making hard choices about, just buying household goods. In many cases, especially after the pandemic, what we saw, particularly the immigrant community, was not a lot of access to unemployment benefits or pandemic relief. And we saw what people had to do to survive without additional pandemic relief, and being with a lot of the closures, a lot of folks had their hours cut or their hours eliminated. And so folks had to rely on each other, and they had to make tough decisions about their family finances and whether or not they had a car, a working vehicle to get themselves to other interviews, to get other jobs. And so it has so many impacts on people's daily choices and ability to even go out and find another job that is either higher paying, or folks are disengaged or unemployed or underemployed.
You mentioned a little bit of this earlier, but I want to pause and talk about your organization, Somos Un Pueblo Unido. It focuses on immigration, immigrant communities, wages, and working conditions. Why those issues, and how do they all fit together?
Well, minimum wage, folks are struggling, and folks are struggling often with full-time work, and so they're just not making enough money, don't have enough benefits. And this isn't just the undocumented community. This is also documented immigrants playing an essential role in New Mexico's economy, right? The industries that I mentioned earlier are really the industries that are really supporting so many other workers in our communities and households. And I'll give you an example. Agriculture is very important. Oil and gas is very important to our state. Majority of folks who work in the least paid and hardest and most dangerous jobs, 12 to 16 hours a day, are immigrant workers. And so it's really tough on their families. And in places like Santa Fe or Albuquerque or Las Cruces, really immigrants are a key part of the tourism economy, the service industry, construction, really, truly supporting so many key aspects of our economy. And so despite being 1 in 10, 10% of New Mexico is foreign born, despite being 1 in 10, we make up about 13.5% of the workforce. And in those key industries, so truly essential to New Mexico's economy. And yet, with these full-time jobs, not being able to sustain their families. I encourage your listeners, and I encourage folks watching, to check out a website that's put out by MIT, and they do a living wage calculator for every county and for every state. And for them, the living wage calculator really takes into account how many folks you have in your immediate family, how many people are working, and they calculate this based on what it would take to sustain a family without having to rely on other forms of public assistance, right? So really just be able to sustain your family is sort of the bare minimum. And what they've calculated for the state of New Mexico for a family of 4, and with 2 children, with 1 adult working, is a minimum wage or a living wage of $38 an hour. And that is that's far from what we have right now. And so what that means is that the vast majority of people in New Mexico, not just the ones making the minimum wage, really are struggling to make not just ends meet, but to have a life where you can, take your kids on vacation for a week or 2, like other upper class or middle class families have. And so these are the things that are really important to families: having extracurricular activities, being able to play on a soccer league or a baseball league. All of this costs money. And those are the things that a lot of families at Somos have to reject and not do because of because of the economic circumstances and because of inflation and rising housing costs. So it's all related. And when you don't have other policies, because it's not just wages that we're talking about, we really need to cause a suite of policy proposals and investments in our communities so that not only do we have these life-sustaining wages and life-affirming wages, but that we do have access to childcare, that we do have access to skills training so that perhaps we can get better, higher paying jobs in our communities, so that we have fair tax policies that really help support low income and working class families. And so I think New Mexico has started to do a lot of that with things like mandated sick leave. I know there's a big paid family leave campaign that will hopefully be successful. These are all the ways that we can support families currently and also get them into some of the jobs. All of this is good for New Mexico's economy. When we are able to bring people in this rung or this category of work into jobs that either better suit them or with a little extra training into jobs that are experiencing big shortages, then other people will fill these other jobs. But then we have an opportunity to grow as families and to eventually be mobile when it comes to our family finances. And so that doesn't happen just like that. It really does take a concerted effort by policymakers and legislators, and of course, organizing from organizations like Somos and Ole and Centro and a host of other organizations that are working to really try to fix some of these structural issues in our state from the grassroots.
Sure. Now, I do want to shift to wage theft. A report published earlier this year by Rutgers School of Management and Labor Relations specifically focused on minimum wage violations in New Mexico. That study found that minimum wage violations have cost New Mexicans more than $1.3 billion over the last 20 years and more than $300 million between 2021 and 2022. First, does that report match with what you've seen on the ground in our state over the last few decades?
Absolutely. Somos Un Pueblo Unido has been doing anti-wage theft work since our members were a very essential part of a campaign to raise the minimum wage in Santa Fe in the private sector. I think a lot of folks in New Mexico forget how pioneering New Mexico can be. And Santa Fe was the first city in the whole country to raise the minimum wage in the private sector. And San Francisco was a close second, but we certainly were first. And what we saw back then was that it wasn't a true minimum wage. It was a wage for employers that had more than 25 employees, and any employer that had fewer or business that had fewer than 25 wouldn't have to pay the minimum wage. And immediately we started seeing, and it was the first in the country. So we were kind of testing it out. And immediately we started to see where people bifurcated. They were creating two separate businesses. So their bar would be one business and their restaurant would be another, so that they could stay under the 25-person threshold. And so we started, that really incensed a lot of workers who were working for these companies and businesses for a long time. And so they came to Somos and started organizing and say, hey, why aren't we getting paid this minimum wage that we fought for? And it was because employers were skirting around the law by using some of these loopholes. And so eventually we fixed that loophole, created a true standard, which really is what minimum wages and basic labor standards. Very hard it's very hard for employers, but it's certainly harder for workers when you're seeing different standards for, we're not seeing minimum standards, minimum wage standards, and where you're cherry picking who gets it, who doesn't get it based on the number of employees, et cetera. So that's when we really started seeing a rise of wage theft, or at least that's when people started coming to Somos. And what we also realized was that we couldn't really, as we were sending a lot of folks to the Department of Workforce Solutions, that the laws weren't very strong in New Mexico. And so we started working with folks in the department who actually came to us. This was under the Richardson administration back in 2008. And say, you're sending all of these folks to us, and we actually don't have really strong laws, and we would like to be able to help them more because they're clearly suffering as a result of this, of not getting paid the wages that they've worked. And so, we went statewide grassroots campaign to actually strengthen New Mexico's wage and hour laws and to create higher penalties, longer statute of limitations, and really give the Department of Workforce Solutions an opportunity to really be robust in its enforcement, create more deterrence, but also recognizing and that we did in 2009. So we went from one of the states with the weakest anti-wage theft laws to one of the states now with the strongest. And that's great. But what it does, in addition to being a deterrent to employers in being wage thieves, it recognizes that when you're living paycheck to paycheck and you have a car payment and you have a rent payment and you have, to take your kid to urgent care and you have to pay money and co-pays and all of that, that when you are so tightly budgeting your family household needs and all of a sudden you're not getting 2 weeks worth of pay, or you didn't get the money that you thought you were going to get that month, that can be really destabilizing. It can quickly propel people into immediate poverty, and it can be incredibly stressful for people to figure out how to do that. Oftentimes they go to get short-term loans with really high interest rates, or they borrow from friends and family and just to make ends meet. And this can be really destabilizing. So having higher damages and penalties really does recognize you need to be made whole, and being made whole at this point isn't just paying your straight wage. And I think people don't know the different ways that people are victims of wage theft. It's non-payment of overtime, off the clock. People are asked to clock in when the first clients or customers come in and clock out. Or for instance, if you're working on a job site and you're taking the company vehicle and you have to be there at 8 o'clock and you're taking the company vehicle someplace to do a job, they don't start your clock until you get there. That's a form of wage theft. Those are off the clock violations. It happens so often, like at car washes, for instance. Illegal deductions. So if you break something, it's a part of the job or something, and then you have to pay for it. And then for tipped workers, it's employers stealing tips or saying you're just going to be a tipped worker and we're not going to give you the check for $2.13 or $3 in New Mexico.
Now, back to the minimum wage itself for a second and the purpose that it's meant to serve in terms of how it fits into the larger framework of our workforce. How does a minimum wage rate impact wages up the economic ladder?
Well, it's what we call raising the floor. And so when you have a floor that is well established and you raise it, and this is our sort of in traditional labor parlance, we're raising the floor, and it's not just around wages, it's around benefits like mandated sick leave or family leave. What you're doing is you're really taking the folks and you're giving them a boost, and that trickles up. It's like a trickle up effect, and it gives a boost to other employees and other workers. And that means that's more support for working class families, and then also more tax revenue and more money going back into our local economies, because workers generally spend locally when it comes to their wages. And so that's really important. And we talk about this a lot at Somos. Like, what does it look like? Because not everyone is making the minimum wage. So what does it mean to raise the floor? How does it impact other workers? It really gives people, again, who are minimum wage workers, a fair shot at being able to be more mobile, to have a little bit of breathing room.
We know cities like Santa Fe and Las Cruces have tied their minimum wage rates to inflation. Is that an approach that would work on the statewide level? Or should lawmakers consider other metrics when setting a new wage whenever they do get to it?
I think it's good to have, $12 is not, it's just not enough, right? It's not going to cover, again, the MIT calculation for a living wage is far above $12. And so I think a lot of things need to go into the calculation of the amount, but certainly cost of living statewide. And it is a minimum. What I think is important and what has really supported this from our perspective in Santa Fe is that if we had not had a cost of living adjustment every year, our members would still, many of our members, not all of our members, it really depends on whether there are worker shortages, whether people have a little bit more negotiating power in the industry. Right now, there's still a worker shortage, particularly in the restaurant industry in Santa Fe. But what it gives folks is the opportunity to know that, if there are rising, people know milk is going up and bread is going up. And so they can anticipate, okay, next year, come March, there'll be a little more money in our pocket. What we know is that many of our members, not all, but many of our members continue to make the minimum wage. So, I think it's $14.64 right now in Santa Fe. And so if that were not going up, they would not be making that and they would be stuck at the lower level. So cost of living just makes sense. Many other workers in different sectors, this is expected. They're getting their raises, even if they're nominal, they're going up every year little by little. And so minimum wage, it makes sense to do it. And it's been working in Santa Fe. And when it hasn't gone up, then those wages stay stagnant. But generally, things are getting more expensive. Housing costs are getting more expensive. And so all of that needs to be taken into account when determining the minimum wage. And we absolutely support at Somos, because we've seen it work in Santa Fe, a COLA adjustment or a cost of living adjustment.
Marcela Diaz, thank you so much for joining me on New Mexico in Focus.
Thank you.